filming some ground beef today. This is 90% lean, 10% fat. I got it at Sam's Club. And it comes in this big tube. It's about 10 pounds roughly. The price of meat's going up. I'm sure it's gonna be going up a lot higher, so I figured I'm gonna can some of this since I got it and put it in jars. That way I have some for a while on the shelf. But I'll take you along and show you how I do this. One of the first things I do is I wash my jars that I'm going to be using thoroughly, soap and water. I wash my lids here and the rings. I wash those, and that way I've got everything clean and ready to go once I've got the meat cooked. So I cooked up the ground meat, and I added 3 onions. I fried up 3 onions and mixed them in with the ground meat. So that's all done cooking. You don't have to cook it all the way, just as long as it's brown. Mine's mostly done now. I don't see any pink in there, but if there's a little bit of pink, they say that's okay. And then this is my big boy Presto 23 quart canner. I can double stack pints in this, so I'm going to use this today, and I'll try to show you a couple jars how I do them before I put them in. So what I do is I take the meat here, I drained most of the fat off. You don't want all the fat to be gone, but try to get most of it off. I'm just going to start filling up these jars. I'm not going to pack them down, I'm just going to loosely fill the jars and leave an inch headspace. And actually, I might leave a little bit more than an inch as far as the meat goes, because I'm going to be adding broth to this, just beef broth. Just kind of, that should be good. So I'm just going to keep doing that with each jar, and I'll come back and show you what I do next. So I finished filling up the jars with the beef. I didn't get as many jars as I thought I was going to. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So I got 12 pint jars. I'm going to fill these up with beef broth now, and I'm going to do it to the 1 inch head space that I mentioned earlier. I'm just going to, this is just room temperature, and actually I'm going to put it in a different container because it's spilling everywhere. Gee whiz. Making a mess. In the past, I've done this with just water, and I wanted to try it with beef broth because the last time I did this, the meat, when I opened the jar after just canning it with water, it didn't taste bad, but it smelled like dog food, canned dog food, and it's really off-putting, so I want to try to avoid that. So that's why I'm using beef broth today. I'm gonna make sure I debubble these. That's another important thing. So you're just gonna make sure you don't have any air pockets down in here. Basically, that's what you want to avoid. And try to see if you need any more liquid after you do that. I'm looking here, and it looks like I need a little bit more. About right there. Okay. That looks good. So that's the first one. I'll do that, and then I'm going to wipe the rim of the jar with vinegar. I just do that just in case and I've been pretty messy, so I'm just going to do that to make sure I don't have any grease or debris on the jar. Just wipe it down with some vinegar, and then I'm going to put the lids on. So I'll do that here in a minute. And now I'm just going to wipe with some vinegar here, make sure I don't have any debris on that jar, and which is really easy to do when you're dealing with meat or something greasy. If you get grease on the jar, it might not seal. So these lids are washed, they're clean. They don't have to be sterile because this is pressure canning, so I don't have to worry about being sterile. I just need to make sure everything's clean. And then they say finger tight. Everybody's finger tight is different. I usually just take my thumb and my ring finger and hold the jar in place while I turn it until I can't really turn it anymore. And that, to me, that's finger tight. Then I just load this in the canner. Now I'm going to do that with each one. Just doing this basically at room temperature right now. The canner's not on heat right now. It's just room temperature water in the canner with the rack on the bottom, and I'm just using room temperature beef broth to pour on top of these jars, and I'll just bring everything slowly up to temperature whenever I start to pressure can. It's just I'm not good with timing, as you can tell, so for me, getting everything hot before putting it in the canner is more difficult than just keeping everything the same temperature, room temperature. So I'm putting this up to 1 inch headspace again, and then I'm gonna wipe this with vinegar. Okay. Put the lid on. Finger tight. Oops. And into the canner. And I will come back when I've got all these in. Another thing I want to mention is when you're pressure canning, you just need to follow the instructions that came with your canner. But most canners, they need 2 to 3 inches of water in the bottom when you're pressure canning. You don't fill the pot all the way up with water like you do with water bath canning. This is different. So I've got water in the bottom of my jar with the rack on the bottom so that the jars aren't touching the bottom of the pot directly. You can't do that. They'll break if you do that. So then I'm going to double stack these, and so I'll do that and I'll be back. I've got my canner loaded now. I went back and grabbed some ground turkey out of the fridge because I still had a lot of jars that I had planned on using, but I didn't have enough meat, so I cooked the turkey down, added some onions like I did the beef, and then filled the rest of the jars. And so they're double stacked now, and so I just have to put on the lid, and I've got to line up the arrows here. I'm going to lock the lid down, and then I'll show you what's next. Okay, I've got my lid on. It's locked in place, and I've got my heat on pretty low right now. It's I'm just slowly trying to build up the temperature so that I don't have a lot of siphoning in my jars, because the jars are warm, they're not hot. Usually you would hot pack this recipe or raw pack, but the meat's all cooked, it's not raw. It's not piping hot in the jars, so I want to slowly build up the temperature with all the jars that are in here together. And then what'll happen is, in this vent pipe here, this is going to start to release steam. You're going to see steam come out of it, so I'll show you that. And then this vent right here is going to pop up, and that'll signal to me that the pressure is built up in the pot. That's usually when I start counting down 10 minutes, because you're supposed to let the vent pipe vent with a full steady stream of steam. Say that 10 times fast. You have to do that for 10 minutes before you put your weight on. I have a weighted device here that this actually goes on top of the vent pipe. You don't put that on yet though. You wait till that's vented for 10 minutes and then you put this on. Now this particular model of the Presto canner is it has a dial gauge on it, so you're supposed to go by the dial, and based on your elevation above sea level, you will use your recipe book, which the one that came with the canner is here, and it gives you instructions on, you know, what to do for your particular elevation and how many pounds of pressure, which is what you're looking at this for, is to see how many pounds of pressure you've built up to. And you're going to use the recipe book or the instruction book that came with your canner to determine how many pounds of pressure you need, and how long you're supposed to cook whatever it is that you're canning. So I will show you whenever the pressure builds up, I'll show you the steam that comes out, and we'll be back here in a few minutes after that happens. Okay, I wanted to show you guys, I'm supposed to be waiting for a steady stream of steam, and to me you can see some steam coming out of it, but it's not a steady stream yet, so I'm still waiting for that to happen. And once that happens, then I'll be able to start counting down from 10 minutes. Okay, we've got a pretty steady steam stream coming up now. So I'm going to start my timer for 10 minutes and then we'll be back. Now that I put the weight on, you're gonna see the pressure build, and I'll be back. For my elevation, I need to be at 11 pounds of pressure, so I'm gonna build it up till it gets to 11 pounds of pressure. Then I'm gonna bring my heat down a little bit to a lower heat to keep it around 11. Okay, we're at 11 pounds of pressure now, so I'm going to lower my heat. I've got it on medium right now. I'm going to bring it down to about 3.5. I think that's the sweet spot for this pressure canner. So I'm going to bring it down to 3.5, and it should stay above 11 pounds of pressure. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to start my timer now, since I've hit 11 pounds of pressure, and these pints need to go for 75 minutes according to the instruction book for the pot here, and according to the USDA for ground meat. It needs to be 75 minutes of pressure. Once you hit your pressure, you have to process for 75 minutes for pints, and then 90 minutes if you're doing quart jars. Okay, so my timer just went off. It's been 75 minutes, and I'm going to turn my heat off, and I'm just going to let this sit here and depressurize. Eventually this dial gauge will go all the way back down to 0, and the air vent lock will come down. Once that happens, I'm okay to open up the canner and take the jars out. Another thing I wanted to mention is while this is depressurizing, um, you don't want to rush this process. You just want to take it slow. If you create too much of a temperature change too quickly, you'll wind up with siphoning, where liquid evacuates from the jars, and you don't want that. You want to try to limit that as much as possible. Sometimes it's going to happen regardless, and as long as you don't lose more than half of the liquid from the jar, the USDA says it's okay, that it's fine. But I try to avoid that as much as possible. So while this is depressurizing, I'm gonna go do a few chores. This will probably take about an hour for it to completely depressurize. It's still going to be really hot though, so you just have to be careful. I don't remove it from the heat source. The stove is off now, and they say you can remove it from the heat, but I just leave it on the burner while it's coming down from pressure, and I just take it really slow, so to try to avoid any temperature fluctuations. So that's an important step, I think, that you should take whenever you're doing this, so that you don't wind up with a bunch of siphoning. Okay, so this actually happened quicker than I thought it would, but this is dropped, so that means that the pressure, there's no more pressure in the canner. So I'm going to take this weight off, and I'm going to time this for 5 minutes. This is just the way I do it, to try to prevent liquid loss from the jars. So I'm going to time it for 5 minutes, and I'll be back. Okay, it's been 5 minutes, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to point it away from me, tip it away. Okay, and I'm just going to do that and let it kind of do its thing for 10 minutes, and then I'll be back. Just being careful not to bump any of these. I do see some siphoning, so, but like I said, a little bit's okay. I'm not all that worried about it. Keep them warm and from cooling down too fast. You're supposed to keep them in like a draft-free environment. And they should be good. I heard a couple of them ping, so I know they're on their way to sealing. And you don't want to put these jars directly on like a cold countertop. That's why I have a towel down here, because you could wind up with temperature shock, and then the glass will crack or break and you'll wind up with a mess. And that's got to be the worst feeling after doing all this work. You don't want to lose your product after doing all this. So this is the finished product, and they all sealed. I just washed all the jars with soap and water. You want to do that when you're, especially when you're canning meat, because there's going to be residue on the jar. If there's been any siphoning, you'll have oil residue, so you don't want to attract insects and rodents. So I'll as soon as these dry, I will label them. I'm just going to write the date and what it is on the top of the can, and that's 20 cans. Now I did when I was I wanted a full canner, and I had one jar that wasn't filled, so what I did was I put beans in it, and I canned those because beans process at the same time as the same amount of time as meat, ground meat. So that was 75 minutes in a pint jar. So that's what I did, just so I had a full canner load. I don't like canning with only a partial load in the canner. So everything's sealed, and so hope you like the video. I hope that encourages you to try your hand at canning.